Greetings from Paranormal M, the channel that explores the mystical and the unexplored. Don't miss out on our intriguing narratives. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications to stay abreast of our latest mind-bending tales. We wish you an otherworldly journey. Dream visitation in the form of a movie. My father passed away from cancer almost 11 years ago. I was in my 20s when he died. Sometimes I'll have dreams of my father, but this one was so different. I felt different in my dream and felt different the following day when I woke up. I was in a small movie theater. There were 5 to 6 rows of chairs. I was sitting in the back or the second back row. Other people are coming into the movie theater to sit down. My awake self doesn't know these people, or at least I can't recall anyone specific, but my dream self felt comfortable around all these people. The movie starts playing. It's in black and white. It reminds me of a movie that you would see in the 40s or 50s. Suddenly, my father appears on the screen in the movie. My dream self is shocked and surprised. My dream self knew that he had recorded this clip of himself before he died. He looked healthy and well. He looked like my dad that I knew before he was diagnosed with cancer. In the movie, he's looking at the camera and audience and says, "Hi, TheCarbageGan. I just wanted to let you know that I love you." My dream self is still in shock and speechless. I remained speechless, and all I could do was just wave hello at him at the screen. Other people in the audience remained silent and also started waving at the screen at him. This was all that happened in that segment of the dream that I can recall. I'm tearing up as I'm writing this, even though this dream happened a couple of weeks ago. If this wasn't a visitation dream, then I don't know what is. I previously was a skeptic and didn't believe in any sort of afterlife or spirituality. Over time, with other experiences, I've become spiritual, and I believe that there are certainly things that can happen after we die, but we just don't have the tools or human intellectual capacity to measure it. Situations like my dreams are more proof to me that there is something else going on. Shadow in the tree line. This might end up being a pretty long story, but I want to be as detailed as possible. I work for my city's water department. My everyday job consists of repairing leaks or doing new installations for businesses and homes. There are 2 parts to our water department that keep everything running. Distribution, where I normally work, and production. Production deals with the chemical sides of things. They chlorinate the water and do water sample checks. Production is also responsible for the upkeep of our water well sites and our water storage facilities, like tall water towers you might have in your city. Mowing grass is one of those responsibilities. Both parts of our department are extremely understaffed right now, so we sometimes give the production guys a hand with the grass when they need it. A couple of weeks ago, it was my turn, and here's where the weirdness begins. My city's in central Louisiana with a population of about 45,000 people. We're surrounded by wooded area. No matter which way you travel, into or out of town, you're going to see plenty of trees. As such, a lot of our well sites are located out in the boonies. Most of our city trucks are 4-wheel drive with mud grips because it needs more often than not to have those. I had 4 sites to cut that day. I headed out just before sunrise to one at the end of a long dirt road, where, if trouble strikes, your phone better be charged because no one's going to be able to hear you yell for help. Surprisingly, this isn't where my strange encounter took place. The sun was rising as I was approaching my first site, and on the road ahead of me stepped out a doe with her 2 fawns. Excitedly, I hurried to snap some pictures. To my surprise, the mama and her babies weren't afraid of the loud rumbling diesel I was driving. The speckled fawns made their way across the path as the mom calmly watched me in the truck. Once the babies were safely across, she looked back the way she came and then joined the little ones in the tree line on the opposite side of the road. I breezed through my mowing, loaded the equipment back onto the trailer, and texted my mom the pictures of the deer as I headed back into town. My mom messaged me back saying, "I've read that deer are an omen of good fortune. Looks like you're going to have a great day. Be safe, I love you." And I did have a great day. I knocked out the next 2 sites without issue and everything was going smooth. Until I reached the gate of the last place I had to mow. McKeithen site is the biggest one that we have, and it's closer to town. It's about the size of a football field. It's not in the middle of nowhere, but it's on the outskirts of the city. There's normally plenty of traffic that travels the road there, so there's really no feeling of seclusion, even though it's surrounded by thick woods on 3 sides. I've cut this spot plenty of times, but that day felt different. I pulled the truck through and hopped out to lock the gate behind me. Immediately, I felt like I needed to go back into the truck as quick as possible. I made my way down the driveway to the park near the tower, like I have many times before. But after I parked and killed the truck, everything fell silent and heavy. I don't know how long I sat until I was able to will myself to open the door to get out. Instantly, I felt eyes on me. The feeling was coming from the back of the corner of the field outside of the fence, just in the tree line where the palmetto bushes grow. I calmed my nerves, reminded myself that I was surrounded by an 8-foot inclimbable fence with the gate locked. Yeah, if somebody had a gun, then they could have shot me if they wanted to. But they weren't going to actually get to me. If the barbed wire at the top of the fence didn't get them, a face full of weed-eater string blades would. I jumped on the 0 turn and took off mowing, keeping an eye in the back corner during every pass. After about 2 hours, I took multiple runs due to the overgrowth. I had the entire front mowed and it was time to hit the back by the creepy corner. I was about to head that way, but the mower blades wouldn't engage. I had to take covers off, pull grass out of the belts, and rip grass out from under the deck. I had to grease the pulleys and do all sorts of troubleshooting. I finally got the blades going, and then the gas light came on. Didn't realize it until later, but it felt like something was doing everything it could to keep me from going to that part of the lot. I finally got everything up and running and mowed the back as quick as possible, doing everything I could to keep my sight on that fence. I finally got done and loaded the mower. I still had to do a little bit of weed eating around the area, but when the weed eater wouldn't start, I knew it was time to go. I hadn't had an issue with it all day, but that was the last hint that I needed to get out of there. After pulling out of the gate and locking it behind me, I turned onto the highway to head home, but not before looking at the back corner one last time. That's when I finally saw it. The unmistakable shadow of a figure standing in the palmettos. It wasn't trying to hide or make itself unseen. It was there. Being at a safe distance from it, I stopped and watched. I moved to the side as if it were bending. Try to see me better at the road. It had no distinguishing features, no hair, no clothes, just a person-shaped mass. I decided I had to get as far away from there as I could. And though that could have been so close to it for so long and never saw it, it sent chills to my core. I called my mom later that night and told her what had happened. She told me that she did some more reading about seeing the deer and learned that they're also a sign of protection. Some people believe that a deer means that a higher power is watching over you. After my mom told me that, I couldn't help but think, what if I had not seen the deer that morning? Would I have even seen the shadow? Would I have been able to do something to me? Why did it choose to show itself to me? Is it something about me, or is it tied to that part of the woods? My mom texted me even later that night. She was sitting out on the back steps in my little hometown when she heard something rustling near her storage shed. She shone her phone light into the dark, and what stands there but a deer? Deer had never come into the backyard before, but that night a large deer stood tall, staring back at my mom. She told me she felt like it was there, as if to say, "It's okay, he's safe, don't worry, we got him." The Green Woman. When I was a kid, around 7 years old, I think, I spent the whole day at a cousin's house in my old hometown. He lived right in the middle of town, so we could ride our bikes pretty much everywhere. This was back in '98, in a tiny place that I come from. Everybody knows everyone and keeps an eye out for the safety of any kid that they see. When my mom dropped me off at my aunt's house that morning, she gave me some money to be able to go to the corner store for snacks for my cousin and I. After a while, hunger struck, and I took off on my bike to Reeves' Grocery. It was the best stocked store in town. There were only 2 stores. Pulling up, I noticed an old maroon-colored car parked outside. Reeves' storefront had a store brick wall with about a quarter of the way up, but from the brick up to the roof was all glass. The type of glass that you see through one side, but a mirror on the other. I didn't pay the car too much mind at first. I rode up into the sidewalk and gently rested on the handlebars of my bike against the wall, hopped off my bike, and by force of habit I looked into the store window. In the reflection behind me, in the old maroon car, sat an old lady in the passenger seat. She was dressed in all green, dark green, wearing a beret, and she had one of those crocheted Afghan blankets draped around her shoulders. She looked very, very old. Deep wrinkles covered her face to the point that I couldn't even see her eyes. Her skin had a gray tint to it. She smiled sweetly at me in the mirror, but when I turned around to wave and smile back, she wasn't in the car. Confused, I glanced back at the store window, and I could still see her sitting there in the passenger seat smiling at me. Fight or flight kicked in, and I aborted all thoughts of 3D Doritos and Gatorade and raced off as quick as I could. I didn't even get onto my bike. I just grabbed by the handlebars and pushed it as I ran as fast as my little legs would go. Looking back, the little old lady really seemed to mean me no harm. Her wrinkled face looked kind, and her smile was warm. But my 7-year-old brain yelled, "Ghost!" and told me to run. When I told my mom about it a few days later, she told me sometimes spirits get stuck or have unfinished business they can't pass on. I remember this encounter fondly these days, though, and wish I could have better reacted to the situation. Maybe I could have helped the green lady somehow. Dining room door. For just some background information, in my dining room there's a door to the basement. It's a crawl space, and I've always been creeped out by it. Ever since I can remember, I had an unsettling feeling about the room, especially when the lights were off. When I was probably around 4 or 5 years old, I remember I was walking past the room to go upstairs to bed. That's when I saw a tall human-like figure. I remember I screamed, fell to the floor, and started crying. I wouldn't move until my dad picked me up and brought me to bed. After this, I would have a recurring dream where I would be standing in the dining room and talking to my mom, who'd be in the kitchen. The light would go off, and I would be violently dragged by something down into the basement. I would never see what would drag me in my dreams. These dreams happened for a while, but they eventually stopped. It would seem that it was just my overactive childish imagination. I could think of many explanations for other spooky things that have happened to me in this house, except for the following story. I was 10 years old. My mother had ran to the store really quickly, so I was home alone. It was right after school, so I settled down to do my homework at the dining room table with my back to the basement door. I'd been working for a while when all of a sudden, someone loudly whispered my name into my ear. I whipped around because I literally felt the breath on my ear. When I turned around, nothing was there. So freaked out that I immediately grabbed my homework and hid in the front porch until my mom came home. To this day, I cannot explain it. It was especially scary to me at the time since it happened in broad daylight, and everything related to the dining room before then has been associated with the dark. 17 years later, and the room still makes me feel uneasy. Ghost Cat. Experience two different people, and another short story that may be related. I've been wanting to share this for some time, so here goes. There's two different stories. One is short and may or may not be related to the main story. Since they could be related, I'll include it here instead of a separate post. This took place over a long period of time. Me, a 40-year-old male, got a cat when I was in grade 4. I'm an only child and my mother's a single parent. My cat's name was Clancy. He was my best friend. Not sure if it's relevant to the memory, but Clancy was found at the front step of a shelter that we got him. They believed him to be, about 2 at that time. Clancy lived a long life. He was 2 at the time that we got him, and then he would be 22 when he left this world. Because this took place over such a long period of time, some of the details are a little blurry. I guess the best place to start is with the ghost cat itself. See, Clancy wasn't the ghost cat. Clancy was very much alive, but he apparently had a friend. Not sure if he even knew he had a friend, but he did. So throughout my childhood and into adulthood, I'd always have this strange experience when I slept. As I lay in bed and closed my eyes, I would feel the presence of a cat on my bed slowly walking up toward my head. Every little footstep was felt, the pressure and weight exactly like a cat. Was it Clancy? Nope. I always slept with the door closed, clicked shut. The reason for that is that I liked to sleep in and didn't want to hear my mom get up in the morning. Plus, sleeping with a cat on the bed sucks. Takes all the space, and I don't want to roll over on him. I think people might say it must have been our cat. He just didn't really realize. It wasn't. Occasionally, my cat would bang on the door to my room, and I would let him in or tell him to go away or spray water at him. But not that often. We had him for 20 years, so really, he didn't like to come into my room at night very often, once a year or so. The ghost cat would visit every night, though. As soon as the light was off and I was in bed lying, he would jump up onto my bed and walk slowly up toward my head. It was definitely spooky, but not threatening in any way, and it was silent. Having a cat, you know what it feels like to have them walk on your bed when your eyes are closed. Cats make sounds when they jump, and when they walk up to your face, you can hear them purr, and they'll sniff you or lick your face. The ghost cat was silent, though. No jump noise, no purring, no sniffing noise, and no licking. Just the subtle weight of its steps all the way to your head. Many times I was wide awake thinking to myself, am I crazy? Eventually I just figured it was all in my head and accepted that, well, when I sleep I would feel what I thought was a cat on my bed. Not just my cat, because he was sleeping in the hall or somewhere else. Oh well. This experience was so gentle and non-threatening that I never talked about it. No need. Since it was just some trick I thought of my mind, maybe it was just playing something on me when I was going to bed. Best comparison, like a freight train landed on my roof. So to set the scene, I was living in a trailer. The park was hit by a horrible tornado years prior. It was really bad. Most of the park was destroyed, and it was so bad the ice company was using their trucks to transport to the morgue because of the amount of losses. It was pretty bare landscape-wise, like zero mature trees or anything, very flat. Trailers are pretty spaced out, especially since not a ton had moved in for a while after that. So one day my husband at the time says that he heard the craziest thing that night. That it was so loud and hit the roof, he doesn't know how to describe it. but he doesn't know how no one else woke up. It was like probably dreaming. I'm a light sleeper. I'd have heard it. He worked nights and went back to work that next night. About 2 a.m., I'm finally in bed and I was just dozing off when it sounded like something landed on the roof. Mind you, I had 2 small kids on the other side of the trailer, so the lights in the living room and kitchen were on in case I needed to go check on them because one was only 10 months old. But all of a sudden, whatever it was takes off down the roof. It sounds like a train, like a constant, not like footsteps. And you can hear it moving and getting further away. As it goes to the other end, you can see the lights and things shaking, but not all at once. Only in each room that it's over. Like the kitchen light first, then it stopped in the living room, and then it turns back and comes up the other side. Same thing. Lights shaking, but in reverse order. Then nothing. Like it ran off the roof. Too big to be a raccoon or something. Although I'm not sure how that would have landed like that with no tree or anything around. You would think you would hear something climb up the side, especially right next to where I was laying. I ended up calling my brother to come check things out because I was freaking out. Never in my life heard anything like it. I know it sounds crazy, but I felt nuts. But I was curious about others' opinions, even logical explanations I haven't thought of. I did Google search years ago, and the only thing that came close in explanation was some weird paranormal creature, supposedly spotted in Indiana. By the way, this also happened in Indiana. At least for me, it didn't really help. We were surrounded by cornfields everywhere. It's giving me the creeps. Too many scary movies, I suppose. All I kept picturing was the creepy thing from Jeepers Creepers coming to eat me. In the same trailer, one night laying in bed watching an orb of light travel through the house. Went into the boys' room. Out, then into the next room. Out, into the living room. Gone. I checked everything. Went back to my room into the bathroom, and as I was standing at the mirror, it was like a cold hand on my shoulder. I jumped, but more just startled. Didn't feel scared. It felt like, well, I'm okay, just checking in, kind of a feeling. I think my grandpa was checking in for the second time. The first time I think he did was just nuts. And the second I got my car door, I broke down in tears. But I've made this long enough for the moment. Something followed me home. Let me start by saying this story was 100% true. Every time I tell it or think about it, I get goosebumps. I'll spare you some time and avoid the lengthy posted details and hit the key points. A few years back, my son and I visited a historic landmark near our home. It's at Nemacolin Castle in Brownsville, Pennsylvania, to be exact. I personally have had experiences with ghosts in the past, and I wasn't opposed to having an experience at the castle. It was well known that it was quite active. It was featured on My Ghost Story, if you're familiar with the show. For the intro, the tour guide told us about the history of the castle, families that had lived there, the tragedies as well. I'll admit, I forget some of the other details, but I remember her encouraging photos from people on the tour. She mentioned that the possibility of capturing ghosts and mentioned the shadow man that's often photographed. Moving along, we went throughout the castle, from the top level to the bottom. There were a few rooms I had feelings in, but no sightings. However, I think they're worth mentioning. Room number 1. We were taken to a nursery. It was furnished, and it had been way back and it was occupied by the original owners. The story was that a child there had lived in the home and passed away suddenly, and her playful spirit remained. I believed it to be true because prior to the story, I swore I had heard a child laughing. Room number 2. This room has large windows and a small bed off to the side. The moment I walked into the room, I imagined a woman laying in that bed, older and slowly fading away. Her deathbed, if you will. The tour guide proceeds to tell us a story about a woman who lived in the room. I had to ask, "Ma'am, what's her story?" She replied, "Well, she passed away in this room. She actually died in that spot right there in her bed." At this point, I'm thinking, okay, I'm in tune with the spirits here. I'm expecting an experience. There were many other rooms, but besides being creepy, I don't have much to say on them, so I'm skipping those details. We took several pictures, as everybody does when you visit a haunted house or a hospital or something. We even had the tour guide take a photo of the two of us. I didn't review any of the photos until going home, as I was mostly concerned with enjoying the tour. When we left, we discussed our time in the car. We exchanged our eerie feelings, confirming this place was indeed haunted, and wishing we had seen something maybe. That night my son went to sleep, and my wife and I were laying in bed watching TV. We were discussing the tour, and I heard a man's voice outside of her bedroom window. The window was closed, and it was wintertime, but the voice was so loud from screaming I could hear that, "You shouldn't be here. Are you out of your mind?" I then heard another man yell, "There's nothing you can do." I actually became irritated and opened the door of the balcony to go out and tell those men to stop arguing in the middle of the night by my home. I'm telling you guys, when I opened that door to find complete silence out there and nobody standing around, all of the hair on my body stood up. I knew something was going on. There was no way these men just ran off. I would have seen them. The street was too long both ways, and my house stood alone. I heard arguing, and 2 seconds later, complete silence. Didn't make sense. My wife was pretty spooked, but I told her no worries, they must have left. So we decided to get some sleep. In the middle of the night, I had an experience that was just insane. I was having a nightmare that a man was attacking my wife, and she was so upset and frantic and calling for my help, and I was fighting this man off. Now, sure that we all have nightmares, but here's the kicker. I woke up, but I couldn't move. I was experiencing sleep paralysis. All I could hear was my wife next to me crying and trying to speak, but her voice sounded muffled. So I'm fighting this weight on me, so I can try to help her. I finally can move, and I kiss her on the forehead and tell her it's okay and that I'm here. Look over at the clock, it's 3 a.m., and without missing a beat, she says, "I was having a nightmare. This man was attacking me, and you fought him off, but when I woke up, my body was stuck and I couldn't move. I could look around the room, but I couldn't speak. I kept yelling for you, but nothing would come out." That right there freaked me out so bad that we both had the same nightmare and experienced the same sleep paralysis. I knew it was something from this place that we visited. Something bad followed me home. I finally got out of bed after talking to my wife, with no intention of going back to sleep. I offered to go get us both some water. I returned to bed and we continued talking until somehow we both drifted back to sleep. The next morning at breakfast, we were just silent, still freaked out, wondering if this was going to be an ongoing thing. My son comes down to join us and he says, "Mom, when did you leave my room last night?" My wife looks at him strange and says, "What? I wasn't in your room last night." He kind of laughs and says, "Yeah, okay, Mom, you definitely were, because I remember waking up and you laying down in my bed, rubbing my hair and kissing my forehead. It was like 3 a.m. exactly. I felt your hair when I rolled over, and then I went back to sleep." Listen, y'all, when he told us that, I almost lost my mind. So you're telling me the exact same time we were being haunted, something appeared to our son in the form of my wife? Like, listen, I don't understand it all, but to this day it freaks me out. It's even crazier. Later that day I looked through the photos I took, and there was a picture of me and my son with a shadow man, super tall, in between us. So at this point I'm like, man, I gotta make this thing go away. My wife kept complaining about weird stuff happening in the house, and I promise you our house would be so dark inside. Even with the blinds open, it seemed like light wouldn't shine in. It got so bad that one day I just got fed up. I was home alone, and I remember yelling like a crazy person, saying, "You're not welcome here. Mess with my family. It's not okay. This home's protected by the Lord." And I had enough at this point. Shortly after, this huge weight was lifted off my shoulders, and the home, light was shining in as it had prior. It was crazy to me. So there you have it. The craziest experience I could ever have, and I'll never forget it. Until I die, it'll always be with me. I still want to know who it was and why. Doesn't make sense. Dreams affected by spirits. I need advice. I have a problem that started years ago and is escalating. I've always seen things, and I've had paranormal events in my life that I've ignored. We moved into our current house 16 years ago, and the events continued but escalated, so it ended up where I smudge her home on a regular basis. This keeps things quiet, and I've noticed as the bad dreams start, the corners of the room get darker, so time to smudge again. I know that they affect our dreams, as I had audio recordings from years ago of the spirits affecting my children's dreams. Talking to them, there were 2 male and 2 female spirits in the recording, and a sound would always come before anything started that I could only describe as Velcro being pulled apart. Recently, things have changed. I'm having dreams where I'm getting attacked within the dream, but when I wake, no bruises are visible. But where I'm injured in the dream, I feel the pains while awake for days later. Problem I can deal with by smudging. This is where it gets tricky though. I work as a support worker in a one-to-one environment within his house, and it's following me there. I've spoken to the company and I'm not allowed to smudge his home because I'm forcing my belief on him. I smudged my home 2 days ago, and last night while sleeping I had a dream I was attacked, and I hit back, punched, and kicked the demon from my dream. I was overpowered, and it stood on my hand saying I shouldn't fight back. I woke up and the foot I had been kicked with was bleeding, and the hand that had stood on was swollen badly. I could still sense something was in the room. It's around 8 hours later. The swelling is almost gone, but the bones still hurt. Where I sleep, there is nowhere I could have injured myself to that extent. So here's my problem. Can anyone suggest anything I can do to protect myself that would not be classed as forcing my beliefs that I think? Well, I'm purchasing a white sage plant to keep in the staff room where I sleep, but didn't know whether that would do anything. I've tried to post things in the past to tell what I've been through, but out of the last 30 years, I've been scratched, had my hair pulled, things thrown at me, burned. And I also have seen things constantly, but every time I start to type it out, I get really sick until I have to stop. Even just typing this, my body started to ache from head to foot. Got a violent migraine. Advice needed, please. I've had issues with the paranormal for over 35 years. It follows me to anywhere I go. Relevant later. I can ignore most things when it's directed toward myself. I hate when it affects my family members. This morning, my 2-year-old woke with scratches down the leg. Myself or partner can't really see how we could have done this to himself, but other than that, seems fine. During the day today, my partner's pupils changed to slits. Only way I can describe is like a cat's eyes. She said she could see fine and couldn't tell the difference. I work in supported living and I'm required to stay 24-hour shifts. I've had a few things happen while at work. One night around 5 years ago while at work, I had a phone call off from a work colleague who was spooked due to paranormal things happening to him. I was talking to him to calm him down. My wife at the time turned and looked at me and had the same issue with her pupils, but returned to normal shortly after. This was the only time I'd seen it, and we were together for 20 years. My partner seen my eyes go black, even the white of my eyes. This was last year and it freaked her out. Then another time my eyes fogged as she was talking to me and she saw me, like, age in seconds. Age to the point of being an old man and dying in front of her. Then seconds later returned to how I actually look. I was wondering if anybody had any idea what's happening or how I can protect my family. I can provide more info of encounters if needed, but I said I've had things happen over 35 years, and I've had quite a few encounters over this time. I had an encounter with an old friend. Years ago. Back in 1999. I'm a musician who's been in a few bands back in the day. We had a studio to play and practice in and everything. I was the singer. An old friend, Kevin, came down, filled in for drumming while we were looking for a drummer. He couldn't commit to the band, but was willing to help out. I knew him for years before this. Anyway, we found our drummer and thanked him, and he was on his way. Months go by and we lose the lease in our studio, so the band broke up. few months later, I get a call from a guitar player in a country band. So now I'm playing guitar. Things are looking good. We have a CD and a financial backer who owns the record studios. They also wanted to buy us a bus. Couldn't get any better. Long story short, though, the singer, who doesn't drink, gets drunk, cusses. They wind up cussing out our financial backer. We lose it all. I pack up and head for the Great Lakes. Found a band and started gigging. A year later, I transferred from my job back to Virginia. Every year, there's a band or a jam or a competition here in my hometown. This year, I'll just be watching. So I go to the stage area and listen to one of the bands. I get a push from behind. It's my old buddy Kevin. He is with a beautiful girl. Never seen her before. Not his wife. They both looked great. He looked better than I'd ever seen him. We chit-chatted a while about music and what I'd been doing. Then he told me he sold his drums and hadn't played that much, which floored me. Then he was like, "Do you want to get another beer?" I said, "Sure." So we went to the kegs and he poured himself a beer and me. We continued to drink and listen to the band. Well, that band finished up, and there was time before the next band started. The perfect time for a bathroom break. When I came back, Kevin was nowhere in sight, so I hung out for a little while longer. It was boring now. For some reason, me, the guy who knows everyone and everything, didn't know anybody there, so I left. 2 weeks go by. I went to see some musician friend of mine, a singer friend who married another drummer friend. She asked if I'd gone up to the band jam. I said that I did go. She asked if I'd seen anybody that we knew. I said that I'd seen Kevin, and that we hung out for a while. But besides that, I had seen no one else. She became infuriated. "Bullshit," she kept saying. She was pissed. She didn't even want to hear what I had to say. She told me that Kevin had been dead for almost a year now, and that I was full of shit. I'd never been treated like this before by her. She wouldn't let me explain. She said that he was in Florida and stepped out in front of a bus and he was run over and died. Anyway, she was so ticked and being unreasonable that I went home. I did speak with his widow just last year, and she confirmed he did sell his drum kit. I told her the story. She just said, "Oh, that's interesting." I kind of just left it at that. I don't think she thinks I'm all that sane now. I know what I experienced was real, though. Well, that's my story. Got to hang out with an old friend for about 30 minutes, even though he had passed away. I thought maybe he faked his death. After talking with those that went to his funeral, well, he went into the ground. It happened. I saw and spoke with him, had a beer with an old friend. Ask Reddit. I'd been on my old laptop, and I decided it was time to catch some shut-eye. Normally when I close my eyes, I see these red and blue closed-eye hallucinations. They move left to right and disappear pretty fast. When I closed my eyes this time, there were none. Instead, I saw a ring of white light. Then I realized it wasn't a ring of light at all. It was a circular black shape. It was backlit. The image faded like after an image does when you see something murky. Like two dim lights getting closer and closer. As it got closer, I began to see more definition. They weren't lights, they were reflections off a pair of dark glossy surfaces that were surrounded by a beige-colored shape. Finally, what came into focus were two large, black, empty, void-like eyes. It was the face of, what they commonly describe as the Gray. I immediately felt terrified and disgusted of this thing. It was right in my face, and I wanted to leave or run away from it. I opened my eyes, feeling very uncomfortable. I leaned over and jokingly told the Discord server that I'm in that the aliens might have gotten to me, but I laughed it off. Closed my eyes again, and a few minutes later went back to sleep. But I didn't see the face again, although I can still picture it if I think about it. But every time I think about it since it happened, I get this uneasy knot in my stomach. I get this I've had plenty of horrifying dreams and nightmares. None of them have left me with any kind of lingering tension. Some suggested it might have been sleep paralysis, but I never had the chance to actually fall asleep the first time I closed my eyes. My laptop was right there and open. Hadn't even gone to sleep yet. Didn't feel like it was something happening in the moment. Honestly, it felt more like a memory that had strong negative emotion attached to it. Like the afterimage had triggered something I'd forgotten. Knocks at my bedroom door. Earlier this evening, I was on my computer in my bedroom. I heard 2 or 3 knocks on my door, and the sound of someone trying to turn the doorknob. The door was unlocked, but it sounded like somebody trying to force the knob to turn when it's locked. Didn't think anything of it because my parents were home. I figured it was one of them. I paused my game and paused my movie while telling them to come in and that the door should be unlocked. When the door didn't open and I didn't hear any response, I got up, opened the door myself. No one was there, so I walked further out of my room and looked around. Found my parents upstairs in a separate room. Neither knew anything about the knocking. My mom likes to mess with me and my dad, but I feel like I would have heard her if she tried to run back upstairs. I didn't wait that long to get off my computer. I would have easily spotted her if she was going back upstairs in a rush. Finally, she would have either confessed or been smiling the entire time when I confronted her. The previous residents had 2 people who died at the house. One was an accident and the other was a heart attack, I think. I've experienced one other weird happening, I guess you could call it, while living here, but nothing that blatant. My nieces claim to have seen shadow people upstairs, but I haven't seen anything like that myself. My paranormal experience. In the spirit of Halloween, a few years ago, my friends and I rented an Airbnb for the weekend. One of the rooms had a bunk bed where my friend and I chose to sleep in the lower level. The first night I wake up around 3 or 3:30 a.m. Now I'm on the bottom bunk, and as my back is facing the door, I feel the bed move and my friend getting out of bed. I hear feet go down the metal ladder steps, the bedroom door open, and the door to the bathroom close. Thought nothing of it until I continued to hear breathing coming from the top bunk. I immediately become alert, think maybe this was all in my head, as I just woke up. I get up and look to find my friend passed out, the door to our room wide open, which we closed before we went to sleep, and the bathroom door closed with no one inside. I'm a little freaked out, so I decided to go upstairs, watch some videos since I can't fall back asleep. I didn't want to be down there. All my other friends are passed out, by the way. It's like 5:30 a.m. and I'm tired enough where I'll easily fall back asleep if I tried. So I went downstairs, opened the door, which was not closed when I left. My friend was awake on the top bunk and on his phone, and he jumps up and looks at me in confusion. He asked me how long I've been gone. He said about 2 hours. His face whitens, and he told me that when he woke up about an hour ago, he heard the door close. Someone walked to the beds and get into the bottom bunk. And he's been hearing breathing, right up to the point where I opened the door. The whole time he thought it was me, and he didn't wake me up, so he's just been on the phone the whole time. No one was in the bed, and I didn't tell him my side of the story yet either. Nothing happened the second night, but the day we leave, I decided to do a last-minute check and make sure no one was forgetting anything. I went to the bathroom on the lower level before we leave, and as I go open the door, I hear someone whisper, "Did you wash your hands?" No one was down there when I opened this door of all my friends that were already outside waiting for me. Felt presence in bed. Staying in a hotel. Last night, as always, before going to sleep, I check all the door windows. I was laying in the bed and I heard the sound as if somebody had moved the chair aside. Thought the sound probably came from another room. I believed it because I could see nothing and the lights were on. Played on my phone for a half hour and then turned the lights off. Twisted, turned to the left side of my bed, fetal sleeping position, closed my eyes. After some time, I felt as if somebody walked inside the room. I could hear bare feet rubbing against the ground and then pressure on the side of the bed. Like a person moved in and climbed on. I just thought it's all in my head and the sound is coming from another room beside me. I was gathering up all the strength in my body to turn and punch if there actually is someone in my room, but at the same time convincing myself that these sounds are from the other room, just like earlier. Before I could make up my mind, I felt that someone grabbed me tightly from behind. I could feel the hands, feet, and the whole body pressuring against my back. I was trying my hardest to turn. I even screamed and asked who it was. I could only hear breath. I applied all my strength to get out of his hold. I could feel it was a male. Couldn't turn my neck. After a few moments of struggle, I felt my neck was free, and then it felt like it was gone. I felt free. I turned my head and there was nothing. Turned the lights on, Googled whatever I was feeling. I was relieved that many others have felt the same. A feeling of pressure, a feeling of presence, FOP. I couldn't turn and see the face, but I felt like someone with a dark, demonic-like face was there. I also took God's name when trying my hardest to get this thing off me. It was terrifying. Couldn't sleep and felt like I had 10 cups of coffee. I slept peacefully after a few hours. Couldn't tell if it was real or something in my head because I could feel the touch. I came from a walk, and while walking, I was thinking if the encounter of the same thing was going to happen tonight. Called up my girlfriend and asked her not to hang up and stay on the call until morning. I don't want to ever experience whatever that was. Something hurt my dog. So when I was around 15 years old, I was sat at home watching TV. After a while, I noticed my dog sat in the corner looking absolutely petrified. Called over to me numerous times, but she didn't want to come near me. Eventually, she started coming closer, but very slowly and still acting scared. As soon as she got within touching distance, I went to stroke her head, and just as my hand was about to touch her, she yelped and went flying halfway across the room as if I just kicked her. As soon as this happened, I felt a cold, hard grip on my wrist that lasted a few seconds before slowly being released. After this, I grabbed the dog, stood in front, waiting for my parents to get home. I lived in the house all my life, and nothing like this ever happened before or after. It's been 20 years now, and I'm still 100% that this happened. It's the only paranormal experience I've ever had, but it stayed with me. My nightly talks with a ghost when I was young. So as the title says, I used to have nightly talks with what I can only assume to be a ghost. I used to stay at my dad's on weekends in a nice house. He rented in a place called Longridge in Scotland. I think, honestly, not too sure, but pretty sure that's where the house was. I no longer talk to my dad, so can't really confirm. So anyway, it was a 3-story house, and my room was at the top to the left of the stairs on the 2nd floor, where I was able to see the banister and the top step. Every night this thing would appear and just talk to me. It's kind of yellow, translucent. Its head looked like a lemon on its side, like Stewie Griffin's head on its side. Huge eyes. I called him the Lemon Man. However, I can't remember any of the conversations, but I do remember it being friendly. We had chatted every night and it kept me calm. It was my friend. It told me to never tell anybody about it or he wouldn't come back. I know that sounds very cliche, but it's really what happened. One day I brought it up to my dad and his girlfriend. My dad never believed in that kind of thing, but he told me later that it scared him out of the house. Probably not really why we moved out. He was terrible at keeping jobs and with money. After I told him, he said I shouldn't speak to it anymore. Though we did still stay there a good while after. Never ever seen the Lemon Man again. I was really upset about it. Possible paranormal activity. I'm a 45-year-old male living in a small house that we rent with my fiancé and daughter. Never in my life have I experienced anything ghostly or paranormal until recently. Although I have dealt with sleep paralysis and nightmares of spirits and unseen demonic things all my life. First thing I noticed that really had me thinking was about 8 months ago. My daughter's picture in the living room had fallen down. I asked my fiancée about it. She said it may have fallen when we were walking through the house. Well, the only thing is, it was face down. It was a standing picture that leans back, so no way it could have fallen forward. Then today happens. First odd thing I noticed was when I went to the bathroom and I heard a very quiet dinging sound, similar to a bell. I walk out of the bathroom trying to listen where it's coming from, only for it to fade out before I find the source. Then, about 10 minutes later, I was sitting on the couch, about 9 or 10 a.m., getting ready to play my PS5. All of a sudden, I hear what sounds like a ping-pong ball being thrown and bouncing through the hallway. It's just me and the cat at home. The hair on my body stands straight up. I look at my cat that's on the other end of the sectional, and she's like, "What the hell was that?" So, we both go to investigate. There's nothing in the hallway, but in the closet that's about a quarter of the way open, there's some Christmas tree ball ornaments. Nothing moving, but obviously it's the source. So I'm standing there looking like, what the hell happened? Then a reef falls in the same closet, scaring the shit out of me. It's a very, very small closet where the water heater is. My fiancé has a few things in there for Christmas. There's also a cutout in the ceiling that has a panel over it. This closet's always given me an uneasy feeling. I don't know, maybe it's just the cutout. Should be nothing up there. We don't have an attic or any vents in the ceiling, just a small frame, an A-frame. I assumed it's there in case they needed, well, I guess they needed it for whatever reason. Maybe there's just insulation up there. Last thing I should note. Before I took my daughter to school, she was looking for her other AirPod that she had just discovered she was missing. Strange thing is, after all this happened, I was sitting on the couch, looked over at the table where she was standing, asking about her AirPod, and there it was. Right where she was standing, just minutes earlier, talking about it. I know the common sense thing would have been that it fell right out then and there. Well, no, we have hardwood floors, so we would have heard it. My fiancé said she would have noticed it there. So other than that, my fiancé says that she occasionally has heard strange noises. But she said hers is mostly at night. I've also heard strange noises, but attribute them to the typical house noises. Some of the stuff she's described definitely doesn't fall into that category. One last thing I wanted to share. Yes, until 8 months ago, I've never experienced anything like this, not even close to it. But when me and my fiancé were renting a different place over 10 years ago, we would occasionally be woken up by the sound of a phone ringing. Sort of faint, but obviously a phone. We would get up to check in the room and it was coming from, and the phone wasn't even connected. Keep in mind, not a cell phone, a landline. Well, it seems as though the activity is stepping it up, starting to freak me out and get me frustrated and aggravated. The noises are happening so regularly now. Not only that, there's been a couple of big developments. I'm getting off work at 7 a.m. this morning and my fiancé calls and says I have something to tell you. Wasn't even thinking about what's been going on, so she said, "You sure you want me to tell you?" So I'm thinking to myself, oh no. So she tells me last night at 2:47 a.m. she wakes up burning up to the point of sweating, which she said she experienced the night before as well. Just seconds after waking up, she hears what she describes as a big ping sound. That's what my air fryer just did. The cat was sleeping with her at the foot of the bed. They both jump out of fear. Very shortly, she realizes the hanging mirror on the door, a door-length mirror. It's only hanging on by one corner. I'm thinking, oh boy, oh no. So I get home and she shows me. Because she's already taken it down, it's attached to the door by 3 Velcro strips. Any normal person would think, oh, it's Velcro, it probably just came detached. And that's what I said to her. But it had 3 Velcro strips, 2 at the top, 1 at the bottom. It was just hanging by the one in the top right corner. Still, it's Velcro, right? This thing's been up for several years. Still Velcro, though. Could have just weakened, maybe. well, not so practical considering everything else we've been experiencing. Also, about her waking up the past 2 nights sweating and being hot in the room. Our thermostat, well, you can take a good guess, it's right next to the closet I mentioned in the initial post. So if what they say is true, paranormal activity and drop in temperature coincide, it would make sense that it dropped the temperature near the thermostat, making it run harder and longer. Just a possibility theory of mine. So the more this goes on, the more I'm persuaded to believe it's something paranormal, and I don't like it. I've always been a skeptic about it my whole life till now. Had no reason to believe that kind of stuff, as I never experienced it. But geez, please, make it stop now. First of all, I want to stress that I'm not the one to lie, embellish, or make stuff up. I'm just a laid-back, honest person trying to get through life minding my own business. So today, this morning, continued noises through the hallway as me and the cat are in the living room. All of a sudden, a loud thump toward the back of the house. At this point, I'm getting sick and tired of this. Go to the game room, which is the room right next to the closet hallway, to just sit and listen. My head's close to the window, just the way it was sitting. I do hear some odd distant screaming and other noises, but sounds like that, maybe they're just near the window. Still, it could be anything outside, I suppose, but still kind of strange. What happened next is so unbelievable to me that right out of a paranormal movie amount of unbelievable sent chills through my whole body for several seconds. As I was sitting there on the couch, with the closet to my right, this closet is right next to the closet that gave me the creeps, but just toward the back of it. So just think like one long closet section off into two, so right next to me, almost in my ear, I hear a beastly rattle. Clear as day, without a doubt, no TV or radio or phones on that can produce noise. I almost immediately froze, sitting in absolute quietness. Wondering what's going to happen now, so I peek into the closet that's already a quarter of the way open. I smell a strange stench, but I see and I hear nothing else. So I close the door, go back to the living room. To explain the noise, as crazy as it sounds, you've got to have seen the movie Predator. It's very similar to the rattle that he does. Some odd noises continue, like creaking and very subtle shuffling, like somebody walking and stopping. In the hallway, of course. I felt like someone watching me. I was so creeped out that I was in fear to even walk through the house in broad daylight as a grown-ass adult man. At this point, I'm thinking, I'm going crazy. So I try to lay down, get some sleep. In the living room, because I'm not sleeping back at this point. The only other thing that happens at this point is some casual noises, mostly. There was a point where my cat's somewhere in the hallway. I hear her jump, a thump, and she lets out a little meow. I raise up to kind of check on her, and she looks a little confused, looking at the crack under the closet door as though she sees something. She's occasionally, took the other car keys, of course, but perfect timing. So that's it for now. I messaged some of my strong-faith friends, and they said that I could get somebody in there as soon as possible. I'm officially freaked out to the point that I don't know if I can stay there by myself. So Friday, I had my preacher friend from Florida call me and talk about what's been going on. He goes all over the country preaching. He gave me some useful information. He first told me about a couple of experiences that him and his brother had, but he kept saying he's not sure what would be bringing the stuff on. Him being very religious and knowing my lifestyle, he hinted at me still not going to church. And, I brought up not being married, which he knew as well. So he really said first thing I need to do is get right with God. He wasn't really saying that's what's causing it all, but I got what he was saying. Definitely wouldn't hurt. I do pray almost every day. He also told me about some kind of preaching event that he went to. Apparently some well-renowned preacher that was teaching about certain things. He said he brought up the evil spirit realm, for lack of a better term, evil or demonic spirits or whatever. He said he was explaining how between 2 to 4 a.m. is when they're most active. That my experience, or that it was pretty much all throughout the day. He said he couldn't remember exactly what he said, but he remembers it making a lot of sense. He was trying to go into a couple different things, but he said that it's getting really deep. He was saying something about fear, but had to go, so I wouldn't have been interested to hear what he had to say. But he did tell me I needed to rebuke it. Another Christian friend told me the same, that I needed to rebuke it before it got too comfortable. I felt like I'm in a dream. Never thought this stuff was real. After getting off the phone with him, I went straight home, going through every room rebuking it, with chills running all through me. So the weekend goes by with nothing really happening. Till last night, really. Me, my fiancé, and the cat are on the couch. Fiancé's asleep on my lap. I started hearing noises in the kitchen. Pops, shuffles, creaks, and tapping on the walls. Just have this uneasy feeling, extreme chills. Like almost something rummaging through the kitchen. The feeling of something peeking at me. A few times, and also recently, I think I see a small shadowy figure peek out from the wall and retreat really fast. I just chalked it up to my eyes playing tricks on me, because I tried recording in slow motion, but nothing. Also heard a little bang on the window where the cat was. She's just looking outside like she definitely heard something. Also, at one point during the noises, keep in mind she's pretty much asleep, I look at her and she has her nose up in the air, sniffing like crazy, like she smells something strong. Like I've said, I've noticed her doing this 3 times recently. Kinda odd for her. Forgot to mention I did experience something a little odd Saturday during the day. Sitting on the couch and I heard 3 distinct taps on the window directly behind me. They're probably within the span of 3 minutes. If it was just one, you'd probably think something flew into the window, but funny thing is, it seems we never experienced anything together, or if our daughter's awake. It's usually when we're alone. But if this continues on, even if just one more experience, I'm going to have to make a movie of some kind. My fiancé hates when I bring up anything I experience, and heck, I even hate talking about it, but she says I'm feeding into it and being weak. Maybe so, but she didn't hear what I heard. So surreal. She only notices the obvious things, but I'm more keen to details and little things. With the beastly rattle I heard combined with the noises, stuff being moved, falling, thrown, the cat being so spooked and sniffing like she smells something adds pretty much to all of it. If it was all the minus the rattle I heard, I'd probably be okay for the most part. There's just no way to explain it away. It's clear as day, right next to me, with complete quietness in the house. If someone could give me a normal explanation for that, I would be 100 times better.